Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has warned Donald Trump about preparations for a new large-scale offensive by the Russian army in Ukraine as early as mid-summer. This is what caused the sharp change in rhetoric from the American president. It is reported that during a phone conversation back on July 3, Putin bluntly told Trump that he was not ready for peace and, on the contrary, would intensify the offensive in Ukraine in hopes of fully capturing the 4 occupied regions. It is telling that several sources are talking about the preparation of a new Russian offensive at the same time. Well, Washington is indeed preparing a powerful package of weapons for the Ukrainian armed forces, including long-range cruise missiles capable of reaching Moscow. The White House is hinting that Putin angered Trump with his statement, and the United States president is ready to actually rearm Ukraine and hit Russia's economy as well as its partners and allies with real sanctions. And now, according to sources, Putin warned Trump that a new offensive in Ukraine will begin within the next 60 days. Trump, on the other hand, stated today that he believed Putin was a man of his word, but it turned out that Putin is just a cheap braggart. I'm Alexei Pecci. Today is July 14th. Everything is in order. Before we begin, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, even if you've been watching for a while. Leave a like, write any comment to help promote this episode, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel Pecci. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as soon as it comes in. So today, on Monday, President Donald Trump will announce a new plan to arm Ukraine, which is expected to include offensive weapons. Several sources familiar with the White House's plans told the publication about this. United States Senator Lindsey Graham stated that in the coming days, the United States will provide Ukraine with a record supply of weapons. Graham added that after several months of Donald Trump's attempts to persuade the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin to negotiate, a turning point is coming in the issue of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The senator noted that Trump kept the door open regarding Russia, but that door is about to close. Next, I will quote Graham on the sanctions. Trump has a sledgehammer to strike at Putin's economy and all the countries that support his war machine. China, India, and Brazil buy oil, petroleum products, and other goods from Russia. Putin uses this money for the war, and this bill is truly a sledgehammer available to Trump to put an end to this war. And here's the publication. Today it writes that sending offensive weapons to Ukraine would be a serious step for Donald Trump, who until recently tried in every way to state that he would provide only and exclusively defensive weapons, in order to avoid escalation of the conflict. You remember that mantra about not giving Ukraine anything offensive, otherwise there will be escalation. But that doesn't stop Putin at all. And now American, Ukrainian, and European officials hope that this weapon will change the trajectory of the war and influence Russian President Vladimir Putin's calculations regarding a ceasefire. Two sources said they have reason to believe that the plan will likely include long-range missiles capable of striking targets deep inside Russian territory, including Moscow. According to the specialized publication, Donald Trump is considering the possibility of supplying Ukraine with air-launched cruise missiles. These missiles are intended for the American F-16 fighter jets currently in service with the armed forces of Ukraine and are capable of striking targets deep behind the front lines on Russian territory. And in its basic modification, the missile has a range of 370 kilometers, while in the Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile Extended Range version, which is the improved one, it has a range of 926 kilometers. The strike zone of the first, that is, the basic modification, includes the Voronezh, Bryansk, and Kaliningrad regions of Russia, military facilities in the occupied Crimea, in Novorossiysk, including the bases of the Russian Navy. Well, that means everything floating in the Black Sea is completely under threat. In the improved version of this missile, it's more modern. Most of central Russia, the Caucasus, the Volga region, and even the Leningrad region would be under threat. It is known that the new initiative to arm Ukraine, which will be presented at the meeting between Trump and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, implies that European countries will pay for weapons produced in the United States, which will be sent to Ukraine. Well, in general, as you remember, this exact scheme was discussed back at the NATO summit last month. There is nothing new here, but it is important that the Europeans agree to it. And according to sources, this scheme was proposed by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Well, of course, after consulting with the Europeans had already agreed to this scheme a long time ago. The only question left was whether Donald Trump would agree, and now finally he has agreed. Officials from the United States and Ukraine stated that the meeting between Trump and Zelensky at the NATO summit in The Hague 2 weeks ago was the best one so far. On the other hand, over the past 2 weeks, Trump has become increasingly frustrated by Putin's unwillingness to agree to a ceasefire and by the escalation of Russian attacks on Kyiv and other cities. And now I will quote the key phrase from the article. One of the factors that convinced Trump to take this path was a phone call on July 3rd, in which dictator Putin made it clear that he was planning to escalate the war. Putin made it clear to Trump that within the next 60 days he would make new efforts to occupy territory, up to the administrative borders of the Ukrainian regions where Russia has significant positions. He wants to take everything, Trump told French President Emmanuel Macron shortly after his conversation with Putin. In the following days, the plan to create a weapon turned from an idea into something more concrete. And it's telling that already on Sunday evening, Trump told reporters that the weapons he would send to Ukraine through European countries would include, quote, various samples of very modern military equipment, including Patriot air defense batteries. Trump then said that European countries would fully compensate the United States, making it a profitable venture for America. And he added that he is very disappointed in Putin because of his statements about wanting peace and then escalating attacks on Ukraine. At first he was shouting everywhere that he wanted peace. We repeatedly warned Americans about this situation, both in these broadcasts and through direct communication from Ukrainians. Yes, don't believe that bald dictator. He'll tell you anything you want to hear. He'll flatter Trump, say whatever you want. Yes, from the very first day of the war, we've been for peace. From the very first day, we've been for negotiations, so that peace would come, so that everything would be calm. In reality, during the first 6 months of Trump's presidency, Putin escalated attacks on peaceful Ukrainian cities. And the record for the use of drones against peaceful cities happened just in the last week, during these 6 months of Trump's presidency. In other words, there is no de-escalation, despite Putin's statements. And Trump, let me remind you, said, listen, Putin wants peace. When I talk to him, I can see right in his eyes that he wants peace. Well, finally, the realization has come. And here I should note that the day before, a German publication reported that the Kremlin is preparing a new offensive against Ukraine by the end of the summer, so it is intensifying air attacks to disable Ukraine's air defense. The publication notes that Putin continues to insist on his military objectives, demanding control over 4 Ukrainian regions as well as Crimea, and dictating conditions for peace, such as excluding Ukraine's membership in NATO and limiting the size of the Ukrainian army. Putin is taking advantage of the fact that global public interest in Ukraine has decreased in the 4th year of the full-scale war, which is why Ukrainians are subjected to constant shelling day and night. Meanwhile, Russia is already seeking support for possible subsequent waves of attacks. And we recently saw Lavrov's visit to North Korea, where they negotiated for increased supplies of ammunition, missiles, and live cannon fodder. As Bild reports, the commander-in-chief of the Russian army allegedly personally reported to Putin about the readiness for a new phase of the war and presented an offensive plan for the second half of the summer. It is expected that the offensive will spread not only to the occupied Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions, but also beyond them. Bild separately notes that in order to free up Russian troops from border service, their functions are planned to be transferred to North Korean military personnel. The Kim Jong-un regime has approved the training of 30,000 soldiers. On the other hand, I would like to note that the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine pointed out that the Russians have been advancing since last year and are consistently trying to put pressure. And there are actually no new offensives as such, and none are planned. They say there is the deployment of reserves, changes in tactics, attempts to send assault groups into border areas, attempts to impose battles, to throw reserves into the east, and so on. But it's definitely not about some new offensive being prepared. The Center for Countering Disinformation noted that the offensive objectives set by Putin since last year have failed, and the Russian army is simply trying to overwhelm with numbers. But still, Western sources insist that Russia is preparing a new offensive. That's all for now, friends. Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, hit the bell, and like the video. If you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so financially using the links and details in the description of this video. There you will find Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube sponsorship, PayPal, bank details, and even a crypto wallet. I will be grateful for any support or donation from you. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.